Alrighty, sorry about the super late start today, folks. Had something that was taking up my time that I thought was going to keep me from doing it at all, but here we are. Welcome back to another thrilling installment of Fraggoth Reads. We're going through more of Regenesis by CJ Cherryh. Last time, things continued to descend further into chaos with the death and possible assassination of one Spurlin of Defense. I believe he was the counselor for defense, and he was in the running for counselor of defense. Jacques is the current counselor, and polling data indicated that Spurlin was in the lead against Khalid, who, as we know, is not a nice man. So it is possible that Khalid had him killed. We don't know for sure yet, however, just who's been doing all these things. It certainly would make sense if Khalid thought that he was not going to be able to make any headway. But we will see. Time will tell. At any rate, Ari also got responses back from the people living at Fraggoth that she sent letters to, and she really hadn't thought too much about the fact that people had kind of lived their lives for 20 years, I guess. So good news, bad news. Ollie is not coming. That's the bad news. The good news is Valerie is, just like she wanted. Only downside, Valerie might have been poisoned against her, so to speak, for the last 20 years, because he'd been with the Strassens that had been sent there, Julia and Gloria, and they are not big fans of Ari. So they are headed back to the Razun, to Saitine and thereby Razun. And Valerie may have tried to hit her with like a mind virus or something, some sort of experiential art form. We're not quite sure what that entails exactly. At any rate, things are happening fast now. And that kind of gets us caught up. So let me take a slurp of water here, and we will get rocking with the rolling. Book 3, Section 5, Chapter 1, July 24, 24, 08:21 hours. Gerard and Seely and Aban all reached their 23rd week. They swallowed. Their lungs developed more passageways and blood vessels which would one day soon be useful. The proximity of these structures to each other would ultimately make it possible to breathe. Right now, they drew their oxygen through the bioplasm of the artificial womb itself. And it rocked and moved and occasionally received sounds, internally generated, which made muscles twitch. By now, the brains sent faint light stimuli to a particular center and sound to another. Nothing was overload. Everything was even keel. They each weighed about half a kilo and looked human. Seely weighed a few grams more than Gerard and was a few centimeters taller. Aban was larger and weighed 6 grams more than Gerard. Proportionately, he always would be larger. But Gerard would overtake both in girth and Seely in weight before he was 50. They moved, they turned. They had their own agendas, based somewhat on what the womb was doing. But something different had happened. The two wombs that contained Azzy were active at scheduled times. The one that contained a CIT was completely random. Chaos was a part of Gerard's life now. Order had begun to assert itself in the other two. And that would always be true. Book 3, Section 5, Chapter 2. July 25, 2424, 1931 hours. Probably every vid in Razun that wasn't in a child's room was tuned to the Novgorod news channel. That was probably true up on Saitine Station. This election mattered immensely. The balance of power between parties was at stake, and nobody knew the results yet. The computers were counting and recounting and running complex check routines. Justin and Grant occupied themselves with a manual at home over pizza. The downstairs restaurant, named Seasons, had done mostly deliveries tonight, very likely. Ari was closeted with her staff across the hall. Justin had seen the delivery man with a trolley full of other orders, mostly pizza, with one address designation on it, and that was Amy's apartment. So he had the notion a lot of people were there. Yanni wasn't home, or if he was quiet about it. More likely he was in his office, and if Ari wasn't with her young friends for something this important, it wasn't because Ari was busy and planned to be busy, whatever happened. Oh, did I just reverse the case of that? Oh my gosh. Let's try that again. Yanni wasn't home, or if he was quiet about it. More likely he was in his office, and if Ari wasn't with her young friends for something this important, it was because Ari was busy and planned to be busy, whatever happened. Himself, he just read through a great deal of Jordan's notes, exactly replicated. He'd already read the basic program. So had Grant. And he couldn't concentrate worth a damn, with the clock now 33 minutes past the anticipated hour of the announcement of results. So he skimmed ahead, looking for the last and next to last note Jordan had made on that manual. Sequence of note was determined by the outline of programming itself. But Jordan's handwriting had changed over 20 years, and he knew the way it had changed. It wasn't that hard to find the latest ones. Page 183.23, he said to Grant, a little troubled by what he saw. Grant flipped pages, settled. A little line appeared between Grant's brows. The station had been playing old tape of Spurlin, discussing Gorodin's term as proxy, Gorodin's death, natural causes, that. Then commentators discussing Spurlin's suspicious death and the fact the special team at the university hospital hadn't published a cause of death, discussing Khalid's last administration, familiar stuff to anybody who hadn't been living in the outback for the last 10 years, including the famous argument with young Ari, over and over and over. They'd turned the audio way down. But the breaking news flasher went on, and Justin said, "Minder, sound." Audio came up. "The 5-minute alert has been given. We are 5 minutes away from hearing the results of..." Book 3, Section 5, Chapter 3, July 25, 2424, 1940 hours. "The Bureau of Defense election," the vid said. And the web didn't get the results or relay them any faster, just the time lag between Saitine Station, where the counting was done, and Novgorod, where the news station resided. Base 1, directly receiving the satellite, was a fraction faster than the news station. Micro difference, in the scheme of things. Ari forced herself to have a sip of water and waited as the minute counter ran. Florian and Catelyn, Marco and Wes, and Theo and Jory all watched the big screen. Nobody said anything. She had contingencies in mind. She hadn't said what they were because she didn't want even her most intimate staff knowing what she'd do in certain instances, in case that what she'd do changed someday, putting staff at disadvantage. Second sip of water. The seconds ticked down. 2 minutes and fewer. She put a call through to Amy's apartment, where all the gang was. "Amy? Ari here." Amy answered nearly instantly. "Ari?" "Listening, I take it. If it's Spurlin, I'll send champagne down there. If it's Khalid, you're on your own. In either case, I'm going to be busy for a bit. Hang on." "We're with you," Amy said. 21 seconds. 15. 10. 5. The flasher came up, computer-generated, the actual tally of votes, and the result. Spurlin, by 65%. "We elected a dead man." "Oh, we elected the dead man," she said, and let go a breath as her staff visibly relaxed, and as cheers erupted in Amy's apartment. "Just a second." She punched in Yanni's office while the gang celebrated. "Yanni." "Told you," Yanni said. "I told you," she said. "Go have a party. I have my own to go to." "Not a tear for poor old Spurlin." "What for? We got his revenge for him. Just carry on what we're doing." The autopsy had come in. Delicate death. A scarcely detectable drug, administered in the morning coffee. Murder. Council hadn't wanted to announce that before the election. Now it was going to break and occupy the news. "Incumbent Councillor Jacques," the news channel was saying, introducing its next speaker, and the staff paid absolutely silent attention. "Jacques is on," she said to Yanni. "Let him finish, then get some sleep." "I'll wait to hear all of it," Yanni said, and was silent while Jacques said, "The Bureau of Defense mourns the passing of elected Councillor Spurlin, in which sentiment I know I am joined by candidate Vladislav Khalid. The Constitution provides that if a candidate for council seat dies between the closing of the polls and the reading of results, the incumbent councillor for that bureau may, at his discretion, remain in office for the next term. I am opting to remain as Councillor for Defense. I will at a future date name a proxy councillor." Ari frowned. "Yanni?" "I heard. As I see fit. Let us all join in paying tribute to a man," and so on. "Did he agree? Is he still going to name Bigelow?" "I don't know what game he's playing," Yanni said. "I'm going to find out, but damn it, this isn't something for phone calls. Release the damned plane." Jacques, if Spurlin won posthumously, was supposed to have immediately named Gorodon's longtime aide, Vice Admiral Tanya Bigelow, as proxy councillor for defense. All Jacques had to do then was warm that chair until they could organize another election, and Khalid, defeated, had to wait 2 years. It had all been handled. Jacques had just gone sideways. "Ari?" "Khalid got to him," she said. "Khalid got to him. God, this isn't looking like Paxa business, Yanni. This isn't." "I've got to get down there," Yanni said. "I'm taking plenty of security, but I have to get there. I have to talk to Jacques directly. Damn it, Ari, either take over right now or don't. Don't try to steer from the passenger seat." She didn't want to agree. She saw the situation, however, just the same as Yanni. And he was right this time. Jacques was under threat, or he'd been paid off, and she'd guess the former. "Yanni, I'll clear the flight. Protect Lynch. Above all, take care of yourself." Florian and Catelyn had come over to her, where she sat with the Mini, linked into the minder. They had a much quieter manner than a few moments ago. Marco and Wes joined them, just stood and waited. "Yanni's going to Novgorod," she said, "to talk to Jacques. Someone's gotten to him. Maybe Yanni can supply enough security to give him a little backbone. Khalid's people killed Spurlin. I'll bet on it. All of a sudden, I'm wondering about Patilin, too." "Khalid is still up on the station," Catelyn said, "and out of reach. Out of our reach. But he has fingers down here. We need to know where and into what. We need to know why Jacques changed his mind. Yanni's going to ask that question personally. He's relying on Hicks's men to protect him. I'm not liking this. I'm not liking this at all. We'll keep informed, Florian said. Inform me, she said, at any hour of the day or night. If anything happens to Yanni under Hicks's protection... She thought about it, about the danger of a man with that many keys to the systems, when the source of the danger might well lie within the impenetrable heart of another bureau. Get ready to take Hicks down, dead or alive. I'm imposing no conditions. Just don't risk yourselves. Remember, I can axe his accesses. If I hear anything untoward out of Novgorod, Hicks is gone. Understood, Catelyn said, and then, Sirrah? She looked up at Catelyn. We know Hicks used to accompany Director Gerard to Novgorod. There were many meetings with defense in Gorodin's administration and in Khalid's. He went a few days ago. For Yanni. Bureau heads met. Their representatives met. Hicks had indeed gone there a few days ago, talking to Jacques, carrying Yanni's offer to Jacques. It went on all the time. Sirrah? Florian asked, in her long silence. Jacques is going to name Khalid as proxy counselor. He may be hoping we'll raise the bet and bid him back, but we have to be able to guarantee his life. That executive position doesn't help him at all if he's dead, or if his family is. Estranged daughter? Catelyn whipped out her handheld. She said, memory refresher, Solo, no minor dependents, no relationships since 24-21, uncontested division of household. Estranged daughter, grandchild, great-grandchild, affiliated with former partner, not genetically related to Jacques. Solo fit a pattern of people who made it to directorships and council seats, including Yanni. Whereabouts of next-ofs and former partner, Novgorod? Novgorod, Catelyn confirmed. Two available. Relay that info to Yanni, not to Hicks. Tell Yanni we're not relaying it to Hicks. Yanni wouldn't say to her, what do you expect me to do about it without Hicks? Tell him he's got to get some meaningful security around Jacques' family and friends. And Jacques. And damn it, it'll look like hell if we pull Rezunsek in to guard him. Tell Yanni that Spurlin was murdered. That's proof enough. Let the OCI request state to get agents in to guard Jacques. And our bloc will back him in council for doing it. And tell Yanni I say keep Hicks in the dark on the whole move. Yes, Sirrah, Florian said, and got on the phone. She heard him talking to Yanni's office manager, Chloe. Sirrah's orders. Urgent message for Yanni. Yanni was going to spit if she kept interfering and nagging him step by step, but she was about 2 jumps short of voicing the code to override Base 2 as it was, and blood was rushing through her veins, pushing her to do something, take action, go with Yanni to Novgorod. She'd crippled Khalid politically before. Her appearance would remind audiences all over Cytine and Union how that had played out. But that wasn't highly prudent to do. Something about all their eggs in one basket and not declaring war on Khalid until they'd gotten Jacques back in line. Damn Jacques for not following the script. But Jacques sat in the middle of the defense tower, where there were abundant holdovers from the Khalid regime, people who could deliver a message. It didn't matter that Khalid was on the station. His agents were clearly in Novgorod. Tell Yanni I'll be there if I have to, she almost added, but she bit her tongue on it. Yanni was the one who'd been dealing with Jacques. Yanni had made the deals with Jacques and Corain, and she hoped she hadn't enabled this mess by refusing to let Yanni fly down there the day Spurlin died and start running from one to the other, making sure the deals he'd made held. He hadn't accused her in that regard, but there could be some connection. There could equally well have been a bad outcome to her letting Yanni go there too soon and check into the hotel across the park from the hotel that had blown up and caught fire the month Dennis died. There were crazy people in Novgorod. Worse, there was something very, very high level behind Spurlin's death, and maybe behind the rest of it, and Eversnow. God knew what it had to do with anything, but it was a question. She folded the Mini and set it aside on the couch, knowing it would turn up again on her desk the minute she left the room. She decided she'd call the gang down, tell them bring the pizza with them. Her place was focused down on staff, on a minimal dinner and cook's service for all the staff she had staying up and taking care of business. So she did that. Or she told Theo to do it, and told Jory leave the computer, she might need it. What she needed at the moment, Florian was too busy to provide, and she didn't want anybody else. Not the way she was now. She found herself pacing, looked down at Sam's River underneath her feet, glowing with light, the rest of Sam's River reflecting the blue fish wall, reminding her of a tranquility that didn't exist in the world. So Jacques had the reins in his hands and wasn't going to do what he'd promised Rezun he'd do. Retreat quietly as Lynch had done and leave a proxy in charge of defense. Draw his salary for 2 years and then go take his nice posh executive post. They'd had it all set up for Jacques, a do-nothing counselor to do nothing another 2 years and still know his job was waiting for him. And Hicks had flown down there to get that agreement. Well, that hadn't gone outstandingly well, had it? Maybe Jacques just wanted Yanni to come down there in person and hold his hand through the process. Maybe he wanted face-to-face assurance. She doubted that was the game. She paced. She walked up to the fish wall and watched the fish. She'd gotten rather fond of the little pearly jawfish. That was their real name. Opistognathus aurifrons, or goldenbrow, that made their home in the substrate right by the rock. They came half out to see her, tails still in their burrow. They were white, with a bluish opal look to their fins, pale yellow head. Little jewels. Their world was on that side of the glass, hers on this one, and this evening their world was running much more smoothly than her. Oh, sorry. And this evening their world was running much more smoothly than hers. The big Achilles tang came sweeping past, black, orange-detailed, and elegant, Acanthurus Achilles. The jawfish dived into their burrows, and the Achilles, ominous shadow, went on to terrify the rabbitfish, who dreaded everything. Small wars, small problems, everlasting, between species that had been conducting their same business and having the same quarrels since the last ice flowed on Earth. The more intelligent of old Earth species weren't doing much better locally. A small commotion drew Theo and Jory to the front door, and they admitted Amy and Maddie, Tommy with a stack of pizza containers, and the rest of the gang. "Are we doing anything yet?" Amy asked in the same cheerful tone she'd used on pranks and schemes against Dennis not so many years ago. It was incongruous. It filled her with an irrational sense of capability. "Are we doing anything yet?" But they weren't within striking distance of this problem. Just Yanni was. And it was a two-way strike potential. "Yanni's going. I cleared Rezun 1 to fuel. He'll probably go tonight." "He will, Sirrah," Florian said. "He's called for a car. 10 of Rezun 6 higher officials are going with him." "Backgrounds," she said. "Tell Raphael to do it." "Yes, Sirrah," Florian said, and went off to the foyer to do it quietly. Meanwhile, Tommy was laying out the pizza containers on available tables, and Misha opened them one after the other. The smell wafted through the living room. "Catelyn," she said, "tell Kitchen we'd like some wine." She'd have one. She'd earned it. But no other, not tonight. "Call Justin. Tell him and Grant come across. We're having an election party." "But Jacques didn't name Bigelow," Amy said. "That's why Yanni's on his way to Novgorod," she said, and shopped among pizzas, finding her favorite, bacon and basil. She took a slice in her fingers. "Jacques has weaseled." "Is that a word?" "An old word for a slinky little mammal. He's weaseled. We don't know if somebody's gotten to him, or if he's just waiting for Yanni to show up in person and ask him nicely. If he does something like name Khalid, he's been gotten to. Somebody can file on him in 2 months, Tommy said. Tommy had probably looked it up. They can, Ari said, and somebody's bound to. Oh, sorry. Oh. They can, Ari said, and somebody's bound to, Bigelow on one side and Khalid on the other, and we go another 7 months trying to get somebody elected who's competent. Don't talk to me about Khalid. I'm eating. Wine showed up from the hallway at one end, and Justin and Grant showed up at the door at the other. Pizza, she said. Drinks. Call for what you want. Justin didn't ask a question, but he looked a little cautious. So did Grant. It wasn't all good, Amy said under her breath. Jacques was supposed to name Admiral Bigelow proxy and didn't, and Yanni's going to Novgorod. Justin had looked Amy's way. It's not totally good, Ari said, but we've still got Jacques, and Yanni's going there with a guard we hope he can rely on to call in a non-military guard, I hope, to keep Jacques safe. Choose your pizza. It's still warm. We're not celebrating yet, but we're not panicking. Spurlin was murdered. Justin had been picking up a piece of pizza, sausage and cheese. He let it lie. Have your pizza, she said, just letting you know it's dangerous out there. Had that idea, he said, and took the pizza anyway. Haze offered him a tray, white wine and red. He chose red, and had the pizza in one hand and the drink in the other. Grant had gone for cheese on cheese, and white, and settled on a settee near the fish wall, his long legs a little tucked, given the height of the seat. I called you here, Ari said to Justin, because you're on the inside, same as everybody else. Because if I pull Hicks out of his job, and I may put you in as head of Regenesis. Don't even joke about it, he said, the wine glass in one hand, the pizza frozen in the other. No, lock me up, but keep me out of that job. I think you'd actually be good at it. Real-time work, remember? You just arrest them. You don't cure them. I don't want to arrest anybody, Justin said. Ari, you're joking. Tell me you're joking. I'm joking, she said, but she wasn't. She had a short list of candidates she'd trust for the time it took to fill the job permanently. Your other choice is Yanni's job. No, he said, fast. If anything should happen, she said, but it won't, if I can help it. That's why you're here. You'd do it, wouldn't you? A week or two, if you really had to. He stood looking at her with the ridiculous pizza and the wine glass, and finally went and laid the pizza piece back with the nearest pizza. Ari, if you're anywhere close to serious, I'm asking you, pick just about anybody else in Razion. Amy, over there, damn near ran Razion for the duration of the last. I trust you, she said, beyond most people over the age of 18. And if things go wrong, I'll owe you and Grant a very, very big apology for all of it, because things will go to absolute hell, and you're going to get swept up in the fallout. Right now, Base 1 recognizes Yanni as my guardian if I should die. He's responsible for getting me back. And Base 1 recognizes you as second in line to run Razion, and to do exactly that. No, he said earnestly. Ari, no, I'm not remotely qualified. Who is? She asked. Who has a thorough knowledge of the system when it's going badly and when it's going right? I could appoint Wojciechowski or Peterson or Edwards, but they're none of them up to saying no to the right people. I'm not outstandingly good at saying no either. Look at how far it's got me. I spent more time being arrested than anybody else in Razion. That's not your sole qualification. You're qualified to bring me up if you had to. You'd be qualified to bring up Gerard if anything happens to Yanni in the next few weeks. At least long enough to find somebody to be as non-fit as the first Gerard's mother. Tell me you will. Or tell me who's going to do the job. You'd have Amy, you'd have Maddie. She does a lot more than look nice and run a dress shop, believe that. You'd have Sam. He's hands-on, but he's brilliant at what he does. Florian, Catelyn, you'd take care of them. You'd see they were safe. They'd see you were. He opened his left arm of a sudden and wrapped it around her gently and hugged her against his shoulder. He smelled good. He was warm, he was stronger than you'd ever think, and he held her the way nobody ever had who was older, nobody but Ollie, a long, long time ago. She didn't cry, though if she weren't so hyped to fight, she might have, and he didn't make a scene of it. He just walked her aside from everybody else, over toward the garden glass of the dining room, and let her go, and said, facing her, "If I'm all, Ari, if I'm absolutely all there is, I'll do it. I wouldn't be near good at it. I'd be looking for advice wherever it came from. But I'd keep your people safe with everything I could put together, and I wouldn't waste any time getting your next edition into the tank and going, fast as I could. My father, I know, is a question, but he wouldn't be in this. If it came down to it, I'd be there, long as it took for your own people to get their feet on the ground. We don't know things about history, Justin. We don't know how things happened. We just know where things are now. That's pretty well the condition of everybody born, isn't it? Except you, being what you are. And you're Jordan's replicate, so you know things you wouldn't if you were Amy or Sam or Maddie. You know things. You were part of that world the way it was. I know things. So you're the best I could choose, and I'll give you a verbal code which will only work in your voice print, and only if my CIT number has gone inactive in the system. Just say my name 3 times. Just say Ari, 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 and base 1 is yours. Even if Yanni's base 2 is still active. I trust you more than Yanni. And if anything happens to me, you take possession of this apartment and all my staff and every defense this place has. And you bring my friends in until it's safe. Don't get killed. Please don't get killed. He did care. He did. And that mattered. She was in the mode she'd been in when they'd come after Uncle Dennis. Close to that. But she could be amused, just a little, and moved to put a hand on his shoulder. So you don't have to raise you? There's a major difference between you and your father. You really love the work, the puzzles in it. You tolerate me because I bring you puzzles. His brows knit, just a little offense, not much. You're a little better than a puzzle, young sirrah. Just a little. And you're a little better than a puzzle solver. A lot better, in fact. She pressed her fingers into his arm. I've been in love with you since forever. So far, I've been mostly good. And you know that, too. Don't even open that door. My name is Ari, not Kid, not young Sirrah. I wish you'd use it. And you know you are young Sirrah to most everybody. She tilted her head to look up at him, right in the eyes, pursed her lips slightly, and shook her head ever so slightly. I'm Ariane, she said. That covers everything people say I am. You're only half a replicate. Thank God. I'm pretty damn close to the original. Don't worry about me. Just don't let anybody get in a hit behind my back. I want you safe while I'm gone. You're not going with Yanni. Yanni will have already left by now, or be on the verge of it. I'm going to be busy. And I'd like to give you Amy, but she's going to Novgorod. She's real quiet. The media let her alone. She'll find out things. She'll have Quentin with her, and he'll be out of uniform. All very quiet. Just a business trip. Give me a kiss. I'm collecting them. Storage for the next few days. He did, just a kiss on the cheek. She'd wondered what he'd do if she asked. Regime change. Gerard, Aban, Hicks, Khalid, Jacques, Spurlin. Jacques, just recently. He looked up at Raphael. You've seen this? Wait. Oh my gosh. I skipped 2 pages. Oops. Okay, where were we? He did, just a kiss on the cheek. She'd wondered what he'd do if she asked. That he could do that smoothly, that collectedly, said worlds about his mental state. She left him, then, to go talk to Amy.
Sure, Amy said. When?
See if Yanni can infuse some backbone into Jacques and get Khalid shut out. I'm worried, all things considered, that won't be enough.
If Khalid's involved in Spurlin's murder...
Likely it won't stop other things from happening. That's what's got me worried. If Yanni succeeds, Yanni's in imminent danger.
Jacques is in trouble, in either case, Amy said.
He's a dead man, either walking around for a while or cold before nightfall. But we can only protect him if he agrees with us and puts Bigelow in the line of fire, if that's what's going on. This is dangerous, Amy. You should understand that. I'm not sure Patil and Tew aren't linked into this, and that means Yanni is a major target.
I'm in the fish breeding business. It's about your tank. I'm staying in the Wilcox, 3rd floor. Fast to reach ground level, and Quentin's my secretary. You want some blennies?
You've got it, she said. Bore anybody who asks. If you're absolutely sure you're overheard, you and Quentin start arguing about calcium supplements and temperature stability in the bar. Amy laughed. Then,
Understood,
Amy said, with a little pat on her arm, and went to talk to Quentin. A plane took off. Ari caught the sound above the water sound of the room. That would probably be Yanni. Good luck, she wished him. Good luck. Please stay alive, Yanni. Yanni, are you okay? Yanni, are you okay? Are you okay, Yanni? Book 3, Section 5, Chapter 4, July 26, 2424, 0828 hours. Sir, Raphael met Florian in the foyer of the little office, opened the black hall door, and showed him right through. An item had turned up. That was what Raphael's message had said, and when Florian went into Raphael's office, a very anxious young woman leapt up, and bowed that slight degree Rezunsec protocol taught. She was no older than the rest of them, just old enough for assignment. Her uniform tag said Carly BC-18, and she was dark-skinned, broad-faced, wide-shouldered. She clutched half a ream of physical printout to her chest as if it were state secrets. Which, given that Raphael was investigating staff backgrounds, it might be. This is Carly BC, sir. Records.
Sir,
Carly said. Florian took the available conference chair. Carly settled on the edge of her seat and held her printout on her knees. So what do you have, Carly BC?
Sir, Gerard Nye's contacts, systematized. The ASEAN question. Also, Gerard Nye's aides and seconds, their whereabouts, their contacts. I have the computer file.
She touched her breast pocket. Tell me what you learned, Florian said. He expected a little nervousness. Carly BC was new, straight from the barracks. First real assignment. And Carly had, first off, a shorter document within the cover of the first. She pulled it out and handed it over, a set of graphs and schematics. Trips to Novgorod, time spent in Novgorod, meetings with defense, persons involved, Gerard, Aban, Gorodin, deceased counselor. Regime change, Gerard, Aban, Hicks, Khalid, Jacques, Spurlin, Jacques just recently. He looked up at Raphael. You've seen this? I've skimmed it, yes, sir. Specific data on Hicks. Carly BC. Sir, can you pull that out? Carly opened the printout on her lap and frantically turned pages.
It's here, sir.
Large, dark eyes fixed on his.
I broke out stats on each individual involved. Nye, Aban, AB, Hicks, Gorodin, Khalid, Jacques, Spurlin.
Give me the data file, Florian said, and held out his hand. Carly BC opened her pocket and handed it to him immediately, a finger marking her place in the printout. Branches. Branch led to branch led to branch. One person connected to another. It didn't always produce valid theory, but the investigative AI tended to err on the side of the smallest connection once it launched. Well done, Carly BC.
Thank you, sir.
The threads all wove back and forth. That was the pattern. Never expect that it was going to connect up too tightly. Defense was massive. Visits by Aban to Hicks, he said. Do you have that stat?
A lot, sir. I can find it.
She started to resort to the printout again. That's good, Carly BC. No, don't bother. If it's searchable, it's in here, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
I think we're through with Carly BC's report, Florian said quietly. Thank you, Carly BC.
Sir?
She looked uncertain, then started to get up. I'll take the report, Florian said, and took it, and Carly received a nod from Raphael and left. Florian looked at Raphael, at the Azzy who'd been primed to report to Hicks. How are you now, Raphael BR? He said. Are you with us on this?
My contract is to Sarah,
Raphael said firmly. No lingering troubles.
None, sir.
Florian looked at him a long time, and Raphael gazed back, level and long. Take precautions, Florian said. The ferret she sent may have rung bells in certain offices. It shouldn't, but sometimes we aren't as clean as we hope to be. Assume we're not. That's safest.
Yes, sir,
Raphael said faintly. Assume nothing, Florian said. Expect anything, at any time.
Yes, sir.
Florian pocketed the data strip, took the printout in hand, and left what ought to be the securest office in the securest wing in Razion. He went upstairs to Sarah's apartment, to the security station in the front hall, and laid the printout on the desk by Catlin's elbow. Sarah Amy is safely in the hotel, Catlin said. 3rd floor, as she wanted. Hicks accompanied Gerard to defense very many times, he said, and was Gerard's go-between there, as Sarah remembered. Sometimes Aban was with him. Yanni is, by comparison, a stranger in that tower.
The military have their own psyches,
Catlin said. He nodded. I think this has to go to Sarah, he said. I think we need her opinion on this. Book 3, Section 5, Chapter 5. July 26, 2424. 0929 hours.
Yanni's not meeting with Jacques today,
was the gist of Amy's report. It was Friday. Jacques ought to be available. Spurlin's funeral was on the vid, and Jacques was notably absent. Which wasn't good. Ari didn't acknowledge receipt of the message from Amy. There wasn't anything to say. She did message Yanni, saying, How are you doing, Uncle Yanni? And Yanni shot back, As well as can be expected. Funerals depress me.
We're all fine, she wrote. Don't worry about things.
That was about 5 minutes before Florian came through the door and told her they were not fine. Sarah, he said, we have specific data. Aban and Hicks were both Gerard's special envoys to Defense Tower during all recent administrations, including Khalid and Gorodon, and sometimes they were there over 8 hours at a stretch. 2. Hicks is a provisional Alpha supervisor. He has an Alpha assistant, Kyle A.K., and he's provisionally certified for that ASI. The certificate was obtained in the last year of Gerard's tenure. He was in Gerard's office as deputy director for 15 years. He had a key. He could have accessed any manual. As an Alpha supervisor, he could have used any manual in that office.
Oh, this is good, Florian.
You know born men, Sarah, but we know access. He had access.
He certainly did. Access to Aban, probably to Sealy. Access to Yanni's office right now while he's in Novgorod. Every time he's been in Novgorod. Damn it. Florian, do you think Aban would have betrayed Gerard? Killed contrary to Gerard's wishes?
That drew a rapid blink of Florian's eyes, a rapid assessment. Sarah, no, I don't.
Aban was upset as hell when Gerard died. Dennis took him in, but Aban stayed upset. Dennis didn't do anything to help him. Or Dennis couldn't. That's what I think. And maybe Aban continually supplied Dennis with what somebody wanted Dennis to know, or think. Dennis was only half paranoid, until Gerard died and Aban moved in.
Were we mistaken to kill Dennis, Sirrah?
No, she said definitively, and then amended that. I don't think so. I don't think there was anything to save once Gerard died. He'd have killed us.
I believe he would have, Sarah. I know Seely would have.
Seely was always Aban's partner, out in Green Barracks, the way you and Catelyn are partners.
He probably was that, yes, Sarah. It makes sense that he was.
But it's not in his manual, nor is it in Seely's. That's just damned odd. A subsequent generation wouldn't guess that relationship, not based on that manual. A spy wouldn't. It was just in their heads, and Gerard's, and whoever really, really knew them. Bring me a cup of coffee, Florian. Call Catelyn. We need to talk about this.
She didn't need the coffee so much as the time. When they were there, Florian or Catelyn, she had a range of possibilities that might be too wide, too drastic. Call Yanni home now, urgently? That might protect Yanni, assuming Yanni wasn't aiding and abetting. Hicks, with access to Alpha-level personal manuals in Gerard's office. Gerard had been a real Alpha supervisor. On the record, Dennis had an Alpha license. But Seely and Aban both, once they'd been solely in Dennis's care, hadn't had expert handling. They'd both given her cold chills, but it had always been true. Gerard was the one who'd have had those manuals. Gerard was the person that could make the world make sense to Aban and to Seely. And when he'd died, Dennis couldn't handle them. Gerard, damn it, should have found it out if somebody had gotten to Aban. He'd known Aban that well. He'd lived with him that closely. How did anybody get to Aban and Gerard not know it? But everybody'd been upset for weeks after the first Ari had died. Gerard more than most. Gerard hadn't been at his best. Gerard had been emoting, leaning on Aban, not the other way around. And Aban had taken care of Gerard. An Alpha could. An Alpha could end up being the support for his CIT, even if it meant hiding a truth and lying and not getting caught at it. That was the hell of working with Alphas. Given the collapse of the CIT they relied on, they so easily ended up doing all the navigation on a map they didn't wholly understand, and satisfying their internal conditions by the nearest available substitute. The satisfaction of coping well, and rescuing their CIT, and keeping him going. You couldn't have an emotional meltdown and stay in charge, not with an Aban type. Aban might have killed the first Ari, but working with the security sets as she had, she knew. She knew in a way she hadn't been able to accept. That scary as Aban was, Aban hadn't been doing the steering. Aban hadn't been to blame. And she'd gotten over it when she'd made up her mind that she wouldn't abort Gerard, and more particularly wouldn't abort the Aban or Seely Dennis had made to keep him company. Pyramids in the desert. The immortality of the ancients, the burial with worldly goods, with attendants, with all the panoply of kings. Offerings to the dead for the rebirth. She'd had that thought when she'd first known Dennis and activated all 3 gene sets. She'd had that thought when she'd first known Dennis had activated all 3 gene sets. All 3. Even while Aban and Seely were still alive, they'd been reconceived. Were weeks along when Dennis and Aban and Seely had died. The sarcophagus and the womb tank. She gave a little shiver. Knew exactly the same decision had attended her birth, and Florian's and Catelyn's, though they'd all been dead. Who'd given the order to terminate Florian and Catelyn? Not likely Dennis. Gerard. Full circle now. Absolutely full circle. Hicks betrayed you, Uncle. Betrayed all of you. Jordan had been conniving with Defense. He was going to break it all open and bring Rezun down, but that wouldn't have served Defense. If there had been no Rezun in those years, Defense would have been desperate to have one. So Defense just wanted to control Rezun, not bring it down.
They already had their man inside Rezun, and they wrote their own script, not Jordan's. They knew about the Psychogenesis project. They knew it, probably, from Jordan, who'd tried it with Justin, and Jordan would have warned them not to go along with it. Warned anybody who'd listen if they'd asked. But the warnings wouldn't mean a thing to Defense. They just saw a way to have a restart on Ari Emery, a quieter, merely potential Ari Emery, who wouldn't bother them for years, while Rezun kept their contracts. Rezun did the work for Defense, gave them what they wanted. But, damn, who just authorized Defense to move in on Planis? Who authorized that military base built right next to our labs? She leaned over the computer and posed the question. 2404. The year the first Ari died. The year Jordan Warwick became the man in the iron mask, the prisoner at Planis. The military moves in to keep him quiet, cooperates, aids and abets in keeping Ari's so-called killer and their agreed ally in Rezun. Oh, that's not italicized. The military moves in to keep him quiet, cooperates, aids and abets in keeping Ari's so-called killer and their agreed ally in Rezun away from any communication with the outside world. Wasn't that a window on their real set of priorities? The first Ari safely dead, the second in planning. Jordan silenced. Their installation set up at Planis with Gerard's consent. And their own man, Hicks or Aban, with easy, constant access to Gerard's office. But there was a problem with that line of reasoning. Hicks himself had been a victim. Somebody put a Raphael type in Hicks's office, and Hicks, or somebody, put an identical into my security organization. So whose were they to start with? Hicks didn't have the wherewithal, didn't have the knowledge to create them. He had the authority to order it done, but how did he get it past Gerard? And how old is that set? When was the first one setted? 2373. 51 years ago. 51 years ago. On the first Ari's staff. An Azzy named Regis. And who could have done that? How to excavate that much history? Who'd been in a position to do that in those days? Jordan? Not old enough. Gerard himself, when he first started operating, he could have. She'd been down this track before, but mostly not old enough kept coming round and round and round, troubling any conclusion, aiming at the people she'd like to blame. Chi Prang of Alpha Azzy. Whoops. Oh. Chi Prang, or is it Kai? I think it is Chi. Chi Prang, head of Alpha Azzy, holding that position a long, long time. That was the best candidate to have created someone to infiltrate the first Ari's staff. But why? Whose? Chi Prang had never done a thing on record but do her job. Shoot off a letter to Chi Prang and just ask, did you infiltrate the first Ari's staff and Hicks's staff and now mine? It just didn't make sense. And it kept coming down to one who had been alive and in office a hell of a long time. One who played his own side of the board consistently and generally not too quietly. In between outbursts, you tended to forget. Yanni. Yanni was what he was, one of the best. Not necessarily a bad set of motives, but worth questioning. Maybe Hicks had somehow figured out there was a double agent in his office, one he daren't touch. But he could bestow the same gift elsewhere, as Gerard had been doing, spying on the station, spying on the military. 2 games had been going simultaneously.
The military moving in on Planus and getting a hold on Hicks. And Hicks, knowing his own director, Gerard, was spying on him, but Hicks moving very carefully to get at manuals in that office, so Gerard hadn't known. Hell, there was one contrary possibility in that scenario. "Sirrah," Catelyn came in. Florian was right there with the coffee. 3 coffees. Florian knew her. "Sit down," she said. "Wait, I'm thinking." She hit the keyboard again, pulled up Hicks's age as 102. Not that old, but old enough 50 years ago. He'd taken his alpha certs when he'd acquired his assistant, who'd been from Gerard's office. AK-36, Kyle, Alpha, for God's sake. Military Alpha. She stared at the history on the screen. Could she be so blind? Contracted first at 18 to the military intelligence, no information available, reverted to Razun, assigned to Razun Sec after restructuring. The law said decommissioned alphas had to come home to Razun. This one had come to the most natural home for his abilities. Straight from the war, year of the Treaty of Pell being 2353, to Razun, with the decommissioning of his unit in 2358. Put into labs at Razun for retraining. The routine was supposed to require the Axe Code, partial wipe, recontracting. She looked for that specific date, that specific session. Didn't turn up until 2362. God. Who hadn't given the code early on? Why not? Somebody wanting to debrief Kyle AK-36 and learn what he'd been into and what he'd done for the military? Somebody who thought they'd just ask questions and mine him for all kinds of information? Somebody who was an expert interrogator and who might have reason to suspect the military? Someone who wouldn't leave traces and records in the system? Base 1 could do that. Up to a certain limit, Base 2 or 3 could do it. The first Ari could do that. So could Yanni. So could Gerard. So could Jane Strassen and Wendy Peterson in those days, when their relationship with Defense, in the last days of the war, with the whole Gehenna situation, had been going quietly unpleasant. AK-36 himself had specialized in security, and he was Alpha. He was one of those the military had used to analyze Azzy behaviors, to actually serve as supervisors, before Razun had pitched a fit about the practice and demanded that mentally damaged Azzy be taken out of action and returned to Razun, no matter the inconvenience to the military. In 2350, Ari had gotten that measure through council and snatched back Azzy, who were routinely being mentally and physically patched together and sent back into combat. She'd had a famous row with Admiral Azov, but she'd won, which had outraged the military and set the stage for years of uneasy relations between science and defense, so long as Azov was in office. And Kyle AK-36 had been with the military for a number of years after the Treaty of Pell, served in a classified function from which there were no records, accessible. Then in 2358, by law, all remaining Alpha and Beta Azzy had come back to Razun. Razun, namely Gerard, must have tried to unravel him for 4 more years after that, learning things, maybe just trying to understand what his history really was. It was worth looking for those sessions, of which there was no readily available record. That period had ended in 2362. After the Axe Code that ended his contract to the military, Kyle AK-36 had been with Gerard, a skilled psych operator, skilled interrogator, trusted aide, until, around 2404, when Ari died, Gerard had passed the Razun Sec office to Adam Hicks, and passed Kyle along with it, as the one, maybe, to keep the office on an even keel under a much weaker administrator, and who could keep on reporting to Gerard. And who had ordered production on the Raphael types, And who had ordered production on the Raphael types from the outset, in those years between 2358 and 2404? Search failed. But one of them had ended up in Ari's household, and another in Hicks's staff. Who'd setted the other B-28s? No signature. That could mean Ari herself. It could mean it could mean anybody down to Gerard, or somebody working for him. Once AK-36 had finally had the axe code and become, allegedly, a Rezun Azi, he'd been Gerard's specialist assistant between 2362 and 2404. The axe code, designed to revoke a contract, could be a wide-ranging wipe, but wasn't. If the Azi was well selected, the axe code, designed to revoke a contract, could be a wide-ranging wipe, but wasn't if the Azi was well setted. Ideally, it just reset the contract to none and erased specific areas of knowledge and belief. An organized amnesia. You wanted an Azi to know things he could later completely forget. You linked them to the axe code. But the military theoretically couldn't do that on his level, because they theoretically didn't have military supervisors at his level. An axe code was rough, emotionally rough, physiologically rough on an Azi. And without operators like AK-36 to manage it, the military couldn't do that anymore, and when AK-36 was sent home, he certainly couldn't do it for himself, could he? So he'd have held the last secrets the military hadn't erased. And he'd have waited 4 years for somebody to do it for him. Gerard didn't even try to do it, for several years of a miserable limbo, and finally did, maybe with help from Prang. Nice, safe Azi after that. So Gerard must have thought. An Alpha, recovered from the military, and so helpful that Gerard had him doing things he'd used to do, skilled things. She'd bet on it. Or maybe Prang hadn't been in on the actual operation, because of Gerard's own paranoia. She wouldn't be allowed that much window into security psych sets. Did the creation of the B-28s fit into Kyle AK's term of service? One of them had arrived on the First Ari's staff, young, good-looking. The First Ari liked good-looking young men, no fault, as her successor saw it. And that one, Regis, had arrived, some 2 decades on. So had the one in what was, at the time, Gerard's office in Rezunsec, and others, elsewhere. Not Gerard's doing. Kyle's. Reporting to him, just conceivably, or, in the case of those outside Rezun, reporting to anybody who had the key. Oh, Uncle, you created me a hell of a mess. Was AK-36 actually doing all the work with the Alphas that I forever was a little surprised you could really do? And when the B-28 went into your own staff, and the other into Ari's, was it AK-36 who was running them? Or was it you ordering all of it? Spying on Ari, spying on your own staff, on people outside Rezun, out at Beta, up on Alpha Station. That would be like you. And you left Rezunsec, and left the B-28, and AK-36 was still running them. AK-36 was probably still reporting to you, just to keep you happy. Maybe for the same reason you let AK-36 go with Hicks every time he went to Novgorod, every time he visited Defense, just the silent presence, your nice, trustable Azi who remembered things like a human recorder. And of course he was all yours, all the time, all yours. Did you run the axe code without Prang's help? Maybe you did. And it didn't damned well work, Uncle, and you didn't spot it, because you weren't that good, and you shouldn't have been operating like that on an Alpha. Terrible thing, Vanity. Your mother wanted to make you a genius. Maybe it still stung that you weren't all that good, never mind the license. Who killed my predecessor? You did. You didn't ever plan it. You didn't want it to happen. You really loved her. But it didn't take Aban going to Novgorod to have his head restructured. You could have been as careful as you liked where Aban was when you were visiting Defense. But you weren't so careful where AK-36 was, or what he was doing at home, were you? Defense planted Kyle on you, a Trojan horse. An axe code that didn't work, possibly because they'd messed with it, or possibly because they'd just forged the personal manual. And everything in it was right, except that code. Is it possible? Is it remotely possible you didn't cross-check that manual with the original set, or look up that axe code in the archive? That would have been unconscionably careless, Uncle. Maybe you did everything right, and somewhere in the military system they messed with that code and somehow kept him sane. With you, he had total office access to Aban's personal manual, probably Seely's too, since I'll bet you were supervising Seely, definitely to as much cat as he needed on any day of the week. Aban might have made one mistake in his life, just one mistake, and taken a cup of coffee in the lunchroom. Easy, at certain hours, to have a little seclusion, and if AK-36 was really good, he wouldn't have conflicted Aban at all, would he, or taken too long to do the job. Nothing you could spot. Just one hell of a deep initial dose, reassurance, need to contact him again regarding a problem. Then verbal work. Everything couched in benefiting Gerard. Doing good. Gerard being secretly threatened by spies inside the office. Aban could help. Aban could protect him. Aban could get Seely's manual. They could go on protecting Gerard if they just worked together. What else, besides you and who else, besides you and Dennis, could operate Base 2 with authority? Aban. Aban could tiptoe through system with not a trace left. Azzy could be created, setted, records forged without a trace. Any of those things. When Hicks took over, and when Hicks went with Gerard to Novgorod, AK-36 went with Hicks, and ultimately got more specific instructions, didn't he? AK-36 is still in Hicks's office, the whole reason Hicks has a provisional alpha certificate. AK-36 is 122 years old. Kinda if we killed him. 122 is old to be given an axe code. Real old. And especially if the military messed around with it and put a block in that we'll have to break. If we give it, he could die on the table. Then we lose all he might know. It won't be pretty, what needs to be done. We can try to be kind. But we have to move on it, don't we? God, all that, because the first Ari pissed off Defense. Was that it? She'd gotten power enough to start calling the shots, not just with Azzy, with a lot of the things where Rezun cooperated with Defense. The terraforming of Cytine she got voted down. The Eversnow business that Yanni's agreed to, provided we get a base down there, which for some reason maybe they really, really don't want. Check that item at first convenience. Ari was powerful in council, and she'd gotten trade and information on her side, and there was no real way Citizens was going to set up a block with Defense. They're not natural allies. She was getting past just about anything she wanted past. She was creating the arcs. She was negotiating with Earth at times when State couldn't even get a message through. And Jordan made a deal with them. He wanted to bring Rezun down, but it wasn't Rezun they wanted to bring down at all. It was Ari. They'd found out she was dying. They'd found out about the Psychogenesis project, and they weren't appalled. They'd found out about the Psychogenesis project, and they weren't appalled about Ari being reborn. They were interested. Her genius was an asset to Union, but her political power was hurting them. They made their deal with Jordan to get more information. They were using him all the way. And they got the notion they could have a tame Rezun under a more amenable leadership, and still have an Ari who could go on being born and dying unless the system really needed her brain again, while tamer people ran Rezun and didn't have her power in the legislature, and Defense got its way again. But here I am growing up, and I'm not easy to get at, and oh, they'd like to run me. They'd like to. But they can't do that where I am. I've fortified myself inside Alpha Wing. I've controlled all access. I've gotten my own ASI staff, my own circle of CIT advisors. I trust very, very few people, and some people can't get close to me anymore. Raphael was their best try, and I have him. So who are they? Who's the enemy? One sec. Who's the enemy? It wasn't Gorodon. I don't think it ever was Gorodon. I don't think it ever was Gorodon. Maybe it wasn't even Azov, though I never knew him. Maybe it was some force inside defense that we never even saw. Not Jacques, who's just a chair warmer and more a symptom of how defense can't come up with leaders past its own internal politics. And then there was Spurlin. He was clearly on somebody's bad list. He put his head up. He nearly got into control of defense. And now he's dead. Say there's 2 factions in defense, at least, and one of them is the side Spurlin was on, which is pro-Razion and moderate, and then there's Khalid and his backers. Khalid didn't like it when I took him on when I was a little kid. I nearly finished him in politics. The head of intelligence wasn't used to public appearances, and he looked the fool. But now he's back, and he won't be my friend. He'll have the notion, I'm pretty sure, that Razion won't be his to manage if I take over, and I'm very, very close to doing that. It's personal for him. It's emotional, and he is an emotional man. He showed that back when I got him. And he's fast running out of time to stop me from growing up and taking over. It could be weeks or a couple of years. It could be next week, and he and his know it. All of a sudden, they're thinking they've bargained with the devil, like the old story, and it's not looking like such a good deal for them. That's where Khalid's getting his support, isn't it? He doesn't have enough support on his own, or he'd have won the election, but there are people inside defense who see me coming up fast, and they're worried all of a sudden. The rank and file of defense, the electorate, they went for somebody who hadn't gotten embarrassed by a 14-year-old on national vid. And Gerard warned me about that at the time, that I might be sorry. But I was right. I may have kept Khalid from being elected again. The electorate went for Spurlin, and another defeat would about do for Khalid permanently. So Khalid and everybody invested in him has no way to get back. So Khalid and everybody invested in him has no way to get back in without some really unorthodox methods. Like murder. They'd already done that inside Razion to take out my predecessor. What's one more? What's 2 murders and 3 more? There's this Anton Clavery business. Patil dying. Tew dying. They both had Defense Bureau work, lots of contacts, so they were easy to get to. And then Patil was joining Razion, and at the same time Yanni was demanding to set a Razion base down on Eversnow, right down next to their military base. Somebody in defense possibly didn't like that. We've been thinking about Anton Clavery as a Paxer. Paxers have been our noisiest problem. But did the Paxers blow up the tower at Strassenberg? There are those who could blow something up a lot easier. Attacking Strassenberg doesn't make sense as a political move except to expose what I'm doing, except to divert our attention to what isn't their real objective. It's me they really want dead, and they'll take down Razion's power one piece at a time, anything to slow me down. You can only do so many murders without leaving evidence, so they have to ration those. Just peel away the really critical pieces. But I'm not playing their game, and when I do move against defense, I'll have to move fast and be ready for anything. They're not going to let Jacques name the proxy we want. They'll kill him, or they'll force him to name Khalid, and then Jacques will die, and Khalid, who couldn't get in by a fair election, will be councillor, just plain councillor, in complete charge of the military. A man named Machiavelli once said something like, "Commit all your atrocities early. Your enemies will lie low, knowing what you can do, and the rest of the people will forgive you when you turn out to do good things." Florian had set a cup of coffee by her hand. The two of them sat, sipping theirs, waiting. She picked up the cup, took a sip, wondered where all of her people were at the moment. But she couldn't move them. Someone would notice. Just one. Florian. Sirrah, go down to Justin's office. Tell him and Grant to go home. Tell him he's in charge of Alpha Wing for the next while. Jerry and Mark will be under his orders. Then come back here. Catelyn. Sirrah, go down to Raphael's office and tell him I want him and his best 20, no helmets, light body armor. Lethals in reserve. Non-lethals up front. Wait for me there. She had a last sip of the coffee and put the cup down. Body armor for me, too. Lay out one of your outfits for me before we go, Catelyn. A slight hesitation. Then, yes, Sirrah. She opened a drawer, took out the mini, waked it up. Things went in a sequence. She wasn't particularly scared, not even mad at the moment. She just found her awareness stretched wide, trying to see everything, imagine everything, think of everything, and not to drop a single piece in the process. Book 3, Section 5, Chapter 6. Knock at the office door, and it opened before July 26, 2424, 11:02 hours. Knock at the office door, and it opened before either of them could acknowledge it. Justin shut the manual with some deliberation, saw Florian standing there. It could just as well have been Ari. Grant had the same manual under consideration and quietly slipped it onto a neat stack of others. Sir, Florian said, Sirrah requests you go home immediately. Mark and Jerry will be in contact soon from AlphaSec. Is something wrong? Stupid question. Justin got up, picked up his coat. When Florian asked in that mode, it was urgent. You will be, officially, sir, in administrative control of Alpha Wing. Use Base 1 access. Mark and Jerry will be your links to AlphaSec. They will be reliable. They're damned young, he said, feeling a rise of panic, the scatter of thoughts informing him, my God, it wasn't academic. She's doing it. Florian, who was only months older than Mark and Jerry, and the Azzy in charge of AlphaSec, said, They'll take their orders from you, sir. You may also draw on Marco and Wes in Sirrah's apartment. Sirrah counts on you. Come with me. Grant came. He did. They both headed to the lift, under Florian's protection. Down the hall, where AlphaSec had its offices, there was traffic. A few black uniformed officers entering as a group. More of them headed that direction. Damn, he thought, asking himself what he could do but lie low, himself and Grant. Jordan was the competing thought. He couldn't protect Jordan. I'm concerned for my father, he said to Florian. He has security in place, sir, Florian said. They are ours. Book 3, Section 5, Chapter 7. July 26, 2424, 11:28 hours. Units of 2 and 3 went out, walked out of Alpha Wing into Wing 1. One such went to the end of the building and walked across the quadrangle to Admin's curbside door. Another went via the storm tunnels. Another went to Admin and via the as-yet separate second-level connection out of Alpha Wing. That one met up with the unit from the storm tunnels and came up together. Other units were moving. One went to Yanni's office and into Chloe's office, unasked. More showed up outside Regenesis, all with a businesslike manner. Ari stopped, with Florian and Catelyn, at the Regenesis door. Catelyn's regular winter coat was a little large on her, very heavy, and not with fabric. It impeded her fingers getting at the mini in her pocket, but she pulled it out, flipped it open, keyed voice, said, "Cane, cane, cane," and "Go Alpha," and toggled off. "Now," she said, and Catelyn quietly opened the door. Mid-morning, and the Regenesis office was full of people, security and otherwise, with business to conduct. "The office is closed for an hour," Ari said quietly, loudly enough to be heard, especially as voices died away. "Please leave and come back later. Please remember your places." People didn't like to feel pushed. The fact some clericals might know her, and some might know Florian and Catelyn, started a few to their feet without a word, those anxious to reach the door. She said to the receptionist, who had punched keys, "It won't work, probably. I'm afraid not much will for a bit, so we'd like to minimize that time and get things running again. Let Catelyn help." "I can't," the receptionist began, his face somewhat ashen, and by now the room was filling with AlphaSec personnel and emptying of people to see Director Hicks. Hicks, in fact, would find his own door locked, as people would be locked in rooms all up and down the corridors. He might have found a weapon, but that was all right. They had non-lethals to take care of that. "You're no longer working for Director Hicks. My name is Ariane Emery. These are AlphaSec personnel, and I'm now the director of Regenesis. Kindly get up and go have a seat over there. Catelyn will handle your desk. Thank you very much." The man moved, and AlphaSec moved him to a chair and put him into it as Catelyn assumed the desk and appropriated the keyboards. "Gas masks," Raphael said, and Ari put her mask on, as everyone did, including Catelyn, hardly missing a keystroke. The reception area door suffered, as AlphaSec didn't even wait for the niceties of the keyboard, or the chance of a lethal guarding that access on a mechanical trigger. They got past that door and set down 2 bots, which raced back inside at ankle level, very fast. The masks didn't even hint of the smell of smoke or gas, but they were stifling all the same, both an inconvenience and a protective anonymity. Ari pressed hers close to her face, kept out of the way, and let AlphaSec do what they knew how to do, with systems they knew far better, while Florian and Catelyn, armed with lethals, stayed right by her. She could see a little ways down the inside hall, and saw 2 of her teams stopped at an intersection of halls, braced and ready to fire. Where the bots were, she couldn't tell. The general comm stream was scary. Beta and Gamma Azzy wouldn't give up a fight, not by their nature. They needed to be taken down, and that went on. Occasionally there was a burst of fire, and the quieter hiss-thump of non-lethals. Wes was their best medic, but Wes wasn't here. Jay was qualified, and Jay was up there in the halls somewhere, with 2 calls on his attention, 2 of their own down. How bad wasn't apparent. None of the opposition needed Jay's intervention, which meant her people were doing exactly what they were supposed to do, and taking people down, fast. Director Hicks wasn't the most essential target. She'd decided that. Kyle AK-36 was, and Base 1 said Kyle was in the offices this morning, and so was Hicks. Kyle AK was smart. He was independent thinking, and as the attack came down, he would probably take command back there if he hadn't delegated and scrambled for an exit. All these years, Hicks might have thought he was Kyle's utmost priority. But he wasn't. Right now, she'd bet, in contrast to the way she had Florian and Catelyn with her, Hicks was sitting in his office with the door locked and immovable, finding himself all alone and nobody defending him. Base 2 and 3, Yanni's bases, were both completely down, and that meant ordinary doors didn't work automatically anywhere in admin. Base 1 was in charge of things Base 2 had commanded, and if Base 1 said open a door, it opened, whether or not it then blew up because it was booby-trapped. Base 1 had retreated behind the gateway of Alpha Wing, and possibly somebody clever in Regenesis had thought maybe they could barrier it in there and not let it out, but that wouldn't work. Base 1 was always a moving target, and right now Base 2 and 3 weren't awake, just flat weren't awake. They'd had schematics of Regenesis, knew exactly where the emergency exits were and where they led. They knew where the switches were. If there was any doubt, Marco and Wes ran ops from Alpha Wing, with the schematic in front of them, and the eye screen Raphael had on a contact lens showed him where he was in a completely schematic view, a kind of split-level awareness Florian likewise had, and Catelyn, so they knew where their people were. Standard. Florian had said, before they left the apartment, that Regenesis was supposed to have some stuff to try to scramble that, but it wasn't going to work without Base 2.
I've captured a beta target,
Came over the comm stream, and Ari let go a long, long breath, but she didn't let up watching and listening. They'd just arrested Hicks, meaning his office door was open by now. A second later, they heard,
Exit A, coming your way.
A mass of people flooded into the corridor she could see. Ari wasn't ready for it. Florian flattened her to the carpet, made her hit her head so stars exploded in her eyes and things went black for a second. And fire banged out, and the hiss-thump of non-lethals simultaneous with it, right over their heads. Florian's weight went off her as if he'd levitated, and she twisted around to see Catelyn come over the desk and two others of her men hurl themselves at a man who was already through the door, but down and not fighting. One of hers was on the floor, trying to hold the man down, with blood pouring down his own arm. "Easy!" Florian yelled, falling on the now inert target, and was after something in his sleeve pocket. Florian used something with a stab downward, after which the man convulsed, twitching uncontrollably, and Catelyn got a bracelet on him, nasty thing. He convulsed a second time, tried to get up. Catelyn flattened him with a second pulse from the bracelet. Ari supposed it was safe, then. She sat up where she was. Florian had gotten up off the man, then diverted himself to get their own wounded flat onto the floor, and to get at another item in his jacket pocket. "Get Jay," she heard as Florian applied a tourniquet. "Bad one." Things were quieting elsewhere, however. Quiet prevailed in the hall. Jay came running down the hall toward them with his kit, and relieved Florian of his job of keeping blood in the wounded man. Jay's moves were sure and involved things in a kit he had, quickly applied. And Florian sat against the wall with his knees drawn up, breathing through his mouth, and sweating a little, while Catelyn, who hadn't raised a sweat, slowly got up and let two others sit on their prisoner. "Suicide by non-lethals." Catelyn's voice came simultaneously from her and from the comm in Ari's ear. "Rarely works. We got Kyle AK, Alpha Leader. We need a team to wrap him up and keep him from going null on us. We won't leave Syrah. We need some help there. We need some help here." It was no time for her to be sitting on the floor watching, Ari decided. She ignored her headache and swung a knee around, got it under her and got up, using the reception desk for leverage. She sucked in a breath, went around the desk to the console, and found the switch set for A, B, C, and Master. A maze of switches. Blinked. Her eyes were hazing, blurring, and watering. Hell with that. She took out her mini, keyed voice, and said, "Base 1, access. Admin 1, access. Public address. On. This is Ariane Emery." She heard her voice echo through the halls beyond, as it would everywhere else in Regenesis. "Alpha Leader, I confirm Catelyn's order, at your immediate convenience." Damn, her head hurt. It wasn't quite the way she'd planned to take over, but it was better than the alternative. "Regenesis personnel, wherever you are, Adam Hicks has been relieved of command. I am in charge of Regenesis, and I am acting director of Regenesis. All Regenesis personnel continue ordinary duties. Citizens and Azzy, wherever located, you are safe. Certain services have been temporarily disrupted. None of these disruptions jeopardizes environmental integrity. Services will be restored, I hope, within the hour. Will an ambulance please come to the admin wing? We need ambulance service." Florian got her eye contact and held up 4 fingers. "We have 4 casualties in need of ambulance transport, she said. Catelyn was talking on the comm, and it made a jumble in her hearing. Catelyn was requesting something of Marco and Wes, but it was coded and she didn't follow it. All wings except Admin, Wing 1 and Alpha Wing may proceed about routine business, she said. Regenesis requests all persons currently in Admin 1 and Alpha remain where you are and do not make private calls. We estimate this condition will remain for about an hour. Wait for an all clear before venturing into the halls. Thank you. Book 3, Section 5, Chapter 8. July 26, 2424. 12:01 hours.
She's done it,
Justin said to Grant. They'd gone to the dining room of their apartment to have a cup of coffee and do a little work on the manual, but they hadn't gotten any work done. The Minder had the communication stream from Ari's apartment, which carried the background of what was going on in Admin, and the last announcement had come over the Minder loud and clear, probably in every Minder and every PA outlet and the vid channels. That general warning system, intended for major storms or an environmental breach, hadn't cut on since Ari had taken Dennis out. "She's done it," Grant said quietly, "and 4 people are going to hospital. No word about the dead."
Not so bad a casualty list for a revolution, though, as revolutions go,
Justin said, feeling shaky. He was thinking about Jordan, hoping he was all right. But Ari had said not to use communications for a while, so he had another sip of coffee and a bite of buttered toast. "Worried?" Grant asked him.
Worried that it's not just Razun she's taking, that it's Yanni's job at stake, that this turnover in Regenesis means trouble that goes under all sorts of doors, just everywhere. Everything, including questions as to how a candidate for a council seat just happens to drop dead.
"Not just happens," Grant said. "It's on the news now. Definitely assassination. High-tech assassination."
"I'll bet Khalid had rather it wasn't on the news," Justin said.
So Ari, that suddenly... One sec. So Ari, that suddenly, after what she'd said on election night, good God, just last night, had risen up this morning, taken out Hicks, and taken over Regenesis.
What?
Something about this hurts my brain, and it's the "that" in this sentence. So Justin says,
"I'll bet Khalid had rather it wasn't on the news,"
Justin said. So, and now it says, and I quote here, I'm always reading as accurately as I can, "So Ari that suddenly, after what she'd said on election night, good God, just last night, had risen up this morning, taken out Hicks, and taken over Regenesis."
What?
So Ari that suddenly... It must be that it's supposed to be had. So Ari had suddenly, after what she'd said on election. She'd said on election. Had risen up this morning. Something about the way this is written is breaking my brain. Whatever.
"I'll bet Khalid had rather it wasn't on the news," Justin said.
So Ari that suddenly, after what she'd said on election night, good God, just last night, had risen up this morning, taken out Hicks, and taken over Regenesis. And the sum total of everything set tottering sent a little cold chill wafting across his nerves. It wasn't that he mourned the fall of the current administration of Regenesis, which had slammed him into more than one wall and shot him full of drugs. He didn't exactly mourn for Hicks's fate, whatever it was, since Hicks had been Gerard's aide in those days, and Hicks's orders had been at least at fault in the incident in recent memory. Okay. He didn't exactly mourn for Hick's fate, whatever that was, since Hicks had been Gerard's aide in those days, and Hick's orders had been at least at fault in the incident in recent memory. Regenesis had always had an uneasy feeling about its workings, and he wasn't sorry. He was, however, upset about Ari's involvement in it. For one thing, he didn't want his Ari involved in killing people. Dennis, that had been a case of self-defense, and her guard had done it. He wasn't sure what this was, or how many cold-blooded decisions would need to be made, how many extra-legal ones, and he'd have wished, if it was going to be done, that Yanni had. He wasn't sure whether the fact that Ari had moved in Yanni's stead was cold-blooded policy choice, or that Hicks was just too dangerous a man to Ari's interests and might oppose her takeover. And she hadn't included Yanni in the action because, who knew? And maybe she didn't trust him. If that was so, Yanni might not have too much time left to hold power. He and Grant were nominally in charge of Alpha Wing, her base of operations. They were trusted. They were also a target. If young Sarah made a misstep, and trust could shift in a heartbeat. She'd talked about going to Novgorod, about sending Amy ahead of her, exposing herself to the same kind of hazard that had already taken out a newly elected Counselor of Defense. She'd be risking everything, and she hadn't been able to trust Regenesis, who was currently protecting Yanni, and protecting everyone and everything else Rezun called secure, in the solar system, in distant star stations. Did she still intend to fly down to the capital? And do what? Get Lynch of Science to appoint her proxy counselor when she was barely old enough to vote? Get in front of the media and start another war of words with Vladislav Khalid, who probably had just had his rival assassinated? What did she have for assets? Her bodyguard, 2 of them 18 and the other 2, thank God, at least senior security, former instructors, but it was the 18-year-olds who ran things. Besides that, she had a handful of teenagers, a household staff, and 30 Regenesis agents, not one of whom was much over teenaged themselves. What had she said at the party? That there was almost nobody to remember the history, nobody alive who knew how it had been, and why things had happened, and why choices had gone the way they had? Everybody else but Yanni and them, and Jordan, and a handful of the old hands, everybody else from high up in the old regime was dead, except a handful at the wing director level who didn't know the darker secrets. She'd reached the new age, and the old structures weren't there for her to lay hands on. Just Yanni, of all the old power holders that she had to rely on. Flaw in the first Ari's plan, or its brilliance. From his position, storing his own share of the old knowledge, he didn't know which. Damned sure her enemies in the wider world were going to notice that something had changed inside Rezun. Give them a few hours and they'd notice. Orders were going to go out to Regenesis units around the world and in near and far orbit and outbound on starships. New director. New voice. New policy. God, he hoped she'd thought of the smaller details. Book 3, Section 5, Chapter 9. Oh, yowza. July 26, 2424, 12:08 hours. Couldn't get the daily reports out of Chloe. Couldn't communicate. Yanni had even tried the airport, and Frank. At the moment, Frank couldn't be found because Frank had gone downstairs to check on a Regenesis glitch-up, and now they couldn't communicate. The comm had lost its codes, or they weren't working. That was downright worrisome. It was so worrisome, Yanni had taken out the briefcase that accompanied him everywhere, opened it up, and found it was dead, not a single light showing. That tore it. He'd tried the ordinary room phone in the failure of every single high-end piece of electronics he owned, equipment that should have been able to call in armed intervention and now couldn't. He was down to trying to remember his own office phone number. And when he was sure he had, that call didn't go through. There was just a stupid robot informing him, as if he couldn't guess, that the call had failed. There were several things that could explain it. One was that Rezun had fallen off the face of the planet. The other was that an 18-year-old with the opinion she could run things had taken it into her head to try... the other was that an 18-year-old with the opinion that she could run things had taken it into her head to try and just nuked everything that depended on Base 2 and 3. The list of what specifically it would nuke was extensive. He tried the general Rezun phone system, and when that failed, he tried the last useful number he remembered, from the fact he had a boat and occasionally, before the world had gone crazy, had taken a few days off and used it. The number got the general riverport operator. "This is Yanni Schwartz," he said to the man on duty. "This is Director Yanni Schwartz calling from Novgorod. Is Rezun experiencing a communications problem?"
Admin's all shut down, sir. Wing 1, admin, Alpha Wing, all shut down.
Damn. Can you find anybody to run up the hill? Physically? Can somebody just take a car up there and find out what's going on? It was embarrassing. It was downright fucking embarrassing. It really is. It absolutely is.
I'm the director of Rezun. What the fuck is going on? It was embarrassing. It was downright fucking embarrassing. He was exposed as hell. Any casual monitoring by the hotel staff, let alone defense experts, could pick up the call he was making, and he had finally, just before things had gone to hell, tracked down Counselor Jacques. Jacques hadn't been answering any of his calls, though at least his office had been answering the phone, and consistently saying Jacques was out of the office, and no, they had no word yet when he would return. Could they know the nature of the business so the counselor might call back?
Sir, I'm working a barge in at the moment. Oh. Sir, I'm working a barge in at the moment.
Port ops was automated to the hilt. There were numbers for every craft out on the river these days, and there weren't an outstanding lot of personnel down there. The port operator just contacted barges on the river to tell them which channel to use and relayed calls if they wanted to phone someone. It wasn't likely any barge was going to ground itself on a bar in the next 10 minutes. "Just tell the barge to hold position or go round again, and you go get somebody to run up there. What's your name?"
Anthony GA219, sir.
Azzy. He hadn't been sure, but he was instantly more comfortable, knowing exactly the way to communicate. "Anthony, this is the director of Rezun speaking, and I will remember when I get back to Rezun. Do it. You're perfectly within your duty to do this. Go find someone to check up the hill and report back. Their phones are out. I'll keep the line open." That took 11 agonizing minutes. Meanwhile, Frank came in safe and sound with the astonishing news that, no, he couldn't fix the Rezun-Sec glitch, and that now, yes, indeed, their own communications weren't working. "I think we're possibly out of a job," Yanni told Frank calmly. "But I want to be sure she's all right, the backstabbing little rat." "Are we angry about it?" Frank asked solemnly. "About being hung out to dry publicly? Yes, we're angry. I really don't want to have to explain this to the evening news." He had the receiver in hand. He heard Anthony G.A. come back on. "Yes?"
Patrick GP has gone up the hill on your errand, sir, but they're saying he won't get in. There's been an announcement that everybody but Wing 1 and Alpha Wing and admin should go about their business. Sarah Ariane Emery says she's the director of Rezun Security, and she's acting director of Rezun. Is that right, sir?
He drew a deep breath.
Thank you, Anthony G.A. It's locally right. Will you personally try to get a message to the director of Razun Security that Yanni Schwartz wants to talk to her on an urgent basis? Thank you. Thank you very much. He hung up and muttered, Could have fucking told me that in the first place. Well, so why hasn't she... His phone went off. He grabbed it.
Uncle Yanni?
Well? He snapped.
Sorry about that, Ari said. I couldn't warn you. I had a little trouble with Hicks. Is Frank with you right now?
Yes.
Hicks is Ozzy Kyle, Defense Bureau. He's a Defense Bureau plant. Is that the right word? It's possible he messed with Aban and Seeley a long time ago. I'm kind of sure Frank's all right. I think you have real reason to know he is. Are you sure of him?
Damn the brat. I know. Yes, I'm damn sure. And I'm absolutely sure you've had your fingers into my computer where I'd rather you stayed out of, young lady.
I checked just to be sure you were safe inside, but there's really good reason to think you could be in danger from outside, Uncle Yanni. I'd really like you to just come home. Fast. Defense is going to find out what I did real soon if they don't already know. I'm sure they're going to be monitoring as close as Morrieville, and they'll know.
Well, that's fine. I've finally gotten hold of Jacques, and we're just about scheduled to talk. I'm not about to come home.
Yanni...
No, I'm telling you. And don't you contemplate coming down here. I know there's a risk. I have that figured out for myself, young lady. Just don't pile another one on top of it by your coming down here.
Then don't you go anywhere outside the hotel. You make Jacques come to you. I think your security's all right. I ran a fast check on everybody you've got. You know about the B-28s.
I left Raoul home, thank you. Actually, it could be Raoul. It's Raoul. Oh, no. Thanks, Dan Simmons, for corrupting how I pronounce Raoul. Rawl like Paul Endymion. I left Raoul home, thank you.
Good. That's good. You understand what I'm worried about.
I understand. I understand a lot of things, and I can be trusted with a little advance warning. Do you mind turning my access back on, young lady?
I'm terribly sorry about that. It's back on now. It's how I'm talking to you. We just had to be sure we didn't have anybody loose in the network that we couldn't lay hands on.
All agents accounted for?
All accounted for. I have Hicks and Kyle A.K. both in custody. We're just going to ask some questions, particularly of Kyle.
I've got a question. Am I going back to lab work? Am I going for a long vacation in your new township? Or am I somehow supposed to finish my job down here without any further interruption?
I'm just acting director here in the labs. You're still director. Besides, you're still proxy counselor. I can't change that. Only Lynch can. But I'm just really worried about that they're blowing up the tower.
Yes?
Catelyn thinks it could have been a signal to anybody inside Razun to take certain measures. Maybe I just took care of that when I got Kyle, and I haven't been easy to get at where I'm living. Maybe I didn't, though. Just take care of yourself.
Do me a favor. Go a little easy on Hicks.
Because he's a friend of yours? Or because you think he's innocent?
If he's not innocent, he's not a friend of mine. You can tell him that. Tell him I said cooperate with you, or I'll break his neck.
I will. You're recorded, and I'll use that. Take real good care of yourself, Yanni. Your Razun Set Guard is going to get the news in about 5 minutes because I'm going to tell them, since I'm their director. Are any of them with you in the room?
No, he said.
Good, she said. Just in case. If any of them leave the hotel, just let them leave. You're not safe to investigate, and don't risk the status quo trying to stop anything of that sort. I already know enough answers that I can deal with anybody who's going to go over to the other side. Just whatever you do, don't go into the Defense Bureau to meet anybody. Meet whoever you meet outside, or at best over in science, but I don't like you travelling through the streets, and be very, very careful who you let through. Make them all come to you. Be a complete bastard.
That's not hard, he said. Just you watch yourself, young lady. Trust the old wolf to watch his own back.
Love you, Yanni.
Love you too.
he said, and thumbed the connection dead. Is it all right? Frank asked anxiously. Is it all right? Frank asked anxiously. He looked over at Frank, very sure the girl had been into his files, very sure Base 1 could do it. And she now knew something only he and the first Ari had known for well over a century. Frank was AF-997, nearly an original, off the same genetic tree as her Florian, not at all far removed. And that wasn't the number Frank had in every other record in Rezun. Damned sure it would be hard for anybody to get to Frank without knowing his real name, and that said something about how detailed young Ari had gotten about her research. He felt a little exposed, knowing she knew that secret. But at least he wasn't scheduled for a long semi-retirement out at Strassenburg, and she'd just made him an exception in the revision of Rezun authority. Him and Frank. When a whole lot else hadn't been what it was supposed to be, he'd let something major get past him, and he was beyond upset and embarrassed about that fact. He felt sick at his stomach, felt the years reel back, and saw a dozen scenes replay, with a certain different knowledge about a certain Azzy. He stared out the window at the sandstone and concrete towers of Novgorod, at the gray mirror of the polluted harbor, and the barges that connected Novgorod to the upriver. So much that had grown up since the war. So much that had changed. Kyle? Kyle was old history. Kyle had been there for nearly... God, he'd come on staff in 62 in the last century and lived 24 more years this side of the century mark, most of it with Gerard. 6 decades. 6 decades with Gerard and then Hicks, leaking God knew what to whoever was running him. Military agent. Gerard had kept him answering questions on military operations for a few years after his return from service in defense. He remembered a supper meeting in 62, Gerard saying he was finally going to run the Axe Code, reclaim Kyle to active service. Gerard had done that. He remembered Gerard saying it had gone pretty much as he expected, that Kyle hadn't lost any memory, or didn't think he had. No conflicts. No problems. Just like the 30-odd other alphas they'd recovered from defense after the war ended. Most of them specialists, technicals who didn't mentally visit the here and now often enough to be a real problem to recontract. Some had died. But Kyle had been a psych operator, a military interrogator. Kyle had been on Admiral Azov's staff first. Azov. Damn him. The bastard chiefly responsible for the mess on Gehenna. Azov had, later on, conspired with Jordan, had worked against Rezun in those days. The first Ari had stung him badly. Azov and Ari hadn't been friendly once certain things started coming to light, particularly the handling of Azzy in the armed forces, and Azov hadn't lived to find out what else Ari had done to him at Gehenna. Meanwhile, Gorodin had come, friendly to science, supposedly a whole new post-war age in the relations of science and defense. But Gorodin had never thrown the off switch on Kyle, or let Ari in on their nasty little secret. Secretary Liu, who'd served as proxy counselor for Gorodin, had never told them. Friend of theirs. Close friend of Gerard's most of the time. And the military had still been collecting information hand over fist, learning everything that crossed Gerard's desk. They must have known the first Ari's business, as much of it as she'd trusted Gerard with, which would easily be the whole Psychogenesis project, most likely everything involving the feud with Jordan. And, defense had been able to snag Jordan, hadn't they, just at the right time. Nice piece of psychology, that. Offer Jordan the out he wanted, the transfer to Fargon, right when the relationship had gotten desperate. And then when Ari'd gone for Justin, that had been a delicious piece of news. And they'd used it. Defense had been all eager to talk to Jordan. If Ari had ever questioned Kyle herself, ever gotten into Gerard's records, ever done that, Oh, but Ari hadn't been fully occupied with Jordan as the center of her problems in that last year of her life. She didn't regard Gerard's psych abilities all that highly, but she knew he was loyal and good at what he did. And then she died. And after Gorodin? If Kyle had still belonged to Defense and still been reporting to them, he'd been, likely highly active during Khalid's short term. His inside information hadn't saved Khalid from walking right into it with young Ari. Maybe Khalid had ignored the intelligence he'd gotten, hadn't believed the kid was what she was. He'd found it out, in public, on national vid networks. Darker thought still, had Khalid ever really turned loose of Kyle once he'd begun to receive information from him? Intelligence, for God's sake. Khalid had been chief of intelligence before he ever ran for the council seat. He'd been managing Kyle's sort, from way back. Possibly Kyle hadn't ever reported to Gorodin at all. Maybe not even to Azov. They might not have known what Khalid's source was, except that Khalid had good information. Azov had died of old age. Lou had. Then Gorodin. Defense had been nominally the ally of science most of the times, except the brief stint under Khalid. Jacques. Science had urged Jacques into office to succeed Khalid when Gorodin had gone into reju failure. They'd managed to sway Spurlin, now assassinated. Along with two people connected to the Eversnow project, them and the defense candidate who'd agreed to support it and who'd urged Jacques to vote for it. Watch out, Ari said, for his own life at present in Novgorod. Khalid, chief of intelligence from the darkest years of the war, a young and ambitious officer in those days, not so old now when most of that generation were dead. And it was entirely conceivable that his sudden rise in defense had been precisely because of the quality of the information he had on the inner workings of science. Kyle's not ours, Yanni said quietly to Frank, and turned from that gray, misty vista. Misty vista. Kyle's not ours, Yanni said quietly to Frank, and turned from that gray, misty vista. He never has been. Kyle's still Defense. Did you ever see that coming? Frank looked at him, just stared in shock. He never gave a hint. He'd honestly paired with Hicks. It felt that way. It always did from way back. Could that part be real, even if he was Defense? Could be, Frank said. It's going to hit Hicks in the gut, Yanni said. He said Kyle was like a brother, relied on him, trusted him for years. I can't imagine, Frank said. It's got to have torn Kyle up, too. He was different around Hicks. He cared about the people in his command. That's bad, if that's true. That's real bad. Defense must have kept getting reports from him. He can't have liked it. A thought occurred to him. Gerard's office. Hicks's. Access to files. Dossiers. A lot of things. Ari had died, and Gerard had taken the directorship and increasingly turned Razunsak over to Hicks. That was where Kyle had transferred over, and Kyle had attached to Hicks in a way he never quite had to Gerard. Hicks relied on Kyle as a personal aide in a way he'd never served with Gerard, who'd had Aban. Gerard had let Hicks handle Kyle, had let him have Kyle's contract finally, even finagled a provisional alpha certificate for Hicks explicitly to allow him to work with Kyle, because the pairing had seemed to work so well. Ari'd died, and it wasn't suicide. He'd never liked the suicide notion. Too much had been left unfinished. If it hadn't been Jordan, it had been Aban. Basic question of opportunity. Gerard wouldn't have ordered it. Without Gerard, Aban wouldn't have done it. That part of the equation had never made sense to him. But it had never made sense, either, that Jordan had done it. Aban was the one with capability and opportunity. Aban had been upset. Gerard had been upset. Upset had been contagious in the halls in those days after Ari had died. The whole universe had been in upheaval, and for several months after Ari had died, Gerard had been on a hair trigger, and so had Aban. You didn't question Gerard in those days. Secretaries had run scared, and Dennis himself had said, "Don't talk to him. He doesn't want to talk." In days when they'd had the vital job of getting the Psychogenesis project going, and they desperately needed to talk, Gerard hadn't been outstandingly well composed. Settling into the new job, he'd thought, and mourning a woman he'd greatly regarded. Gerard had been loyal to Ari. He'd stake his life on that. So Aban couldn't have done it. Could he? But if Aban had done something that hurt Gerard, there was a little reason for upset in that household, wasn't there? Aban's own origins were in Green Barracks, never shipped out, never left Razion. He had no questionable background. He'd been with Gerard from childhood. Gerard had changed offices, taken Aban with him into admin. Hicks had already taken over Kyle. Everything changed when Ari died. He saw it like a chessboard. All the pieces suddenly, massively shifted on the board. White had castled up, and young Ari had been a mote in a womb tank for a whole, mostly peaceful 9 months. Once that had happened, Gerard had settled, as if the universe was right again. "What are you thinking?" Frank asked him finally.
"That Aban never could have killed Ari," he said. "No more than Jordan could. Unless..."
"Unless," Frank said.
"Unless he believed it was in Gerard's interest," he said. "Maybe somebody told him that. And then, in the aftermath, maybe he knew it wasn't as true as he thought it was. At least in the immediate effects. Gerard's upset would have been hard for him to take. A very, very upsetting thing."
"He was an alpha," Frank said. "He could put himself back together."
"And he had a rationale. Gerard was walking wounded. But he'd protected Gerard from some unspecified danger. Now he had to take care of Gerard. So he did that, didn't he? But nobody ever took care of Aban. Aban couldn't tell Gerard what he'd done. And the week Gerard died, he went into Dennis's care, and nobody ever took care of Aban."
Frank looked upset. They'd known one another. Frank and Aban worked together. They'd remarked, more than once, how it was a damned lie that Dennis was capable of handling Seelie, let alone Aban, when Aban came over to him. They both knew about Dennis's Alpha certificate, which was as fake as they came. Aban had needed immediate help when Gerard died, and Dennis had gotten notions in his head about staying in power, and nobody touched Aban. He'd sent Aban after Ari, and Aban was already messed up.
"Killing the same woman twice," he said to Frank, "and the first having been a mistake, that's got to have rung clear to his deep sets. Nasty, nasty piece of business."
"Nobody ever felt sorry for Aban," Frank said, "but he wasn't right then. He really wasn't right when he did that." A moment later, Frank said, "All those years with Dennis, Seelie wasn't in that good shape either."
"More than that," Yanni said. "If Gerard didn't order Aban to kill Ari, Aban wouldn't go out on his own. He had orders. And if they weren't from Gerard, maybe they weren't from Dennis either. That notion's always bothered me. Dennis wasn't able to order that, not while Gerard was alive. That order came from somewhere else, a decision that Ari had been around long enough. Knowledge that she was already dying, that it would only shorten her life a year, and not let her finish arranging things herself. It would throw the decisions all to Gerard."
"Kyle," Frank said.
"Kyle, and the ones directing him," Yanni said. "Defense. She'd yanked Jordan out of negotiations with them and brought him home. She was working just maybe too close to sensitive areas, on the verge of finding out just who'd been exacerbating Jordan's discontent, setting him up, if you want my opinion, to land on the radical side of things. Setting him up, if you want my opinion, to land on the radical side of things. He'd been corresponding with the Paxers, with the abolitionists, as it turned out, though I think it came as a shock to him when he found it out. And Ari took measures to be sure Justin didn't go down his father's route. I think she was on the track of something that could have become very uncomfortable for Kyle's managers. I think they knew she was close to dealing with it. And Hicks went on meeting with Defense, and Kyle was right with him.
Kyle got his instructions there, Frank said.
Exactly. Tell me, would you take instruction from another Azzy?
I don't know, Frank said. I can say I wouldn't. But if the keys were there, who could say he wouldn't?
And Aban was Gerard's, Yanni said, and Kyle was, at the time. Totally inside the walls. Damn, that's a nasty scenario.
In a way, Ari caught it, Frank said. It took the next Ari to do it. Suppose there was something in the first Ari's nose. Suppose the first Ari put her onto it. Or did she figure it out? Yanni thought about it, thought about the way things had been going, and slowly shook his head.
I think if the first Ari had known, she'd have moved on Kyle faster than you could blink, and she'd have had Gerard's help doing it. I think our little Ari has come up with this one on her own. Damn clever of her. There's only one thing wrong with her scenario.
That being?
She's just told Defense she knows what their game is. She just stopped it.
Yanni looked toward the gray view again, the towers beside the sea, the towers that were science and defense, trade and state. The other five, citizens, information, industry, internal affairs, and finance, were just out of view. So was the tower that constituted the Capitol itself, Cytene's Senate building, and the tower that held the Council of Nine, the Senate, and if the dividing wall were folded back, the Council of Worlds. He could call down the heavens. If he wanted to let havoc loose, he could gather all his evidence of assassination and espionage and take it to the Nine and lay it before the Council of Worlds. But Ari was right. It was getting dangerous. As things stood, it was a major risk for him just to take a car to the airport, and he wasn't sure he'd survive to get there. It was a risk to go to science, a risk for Jacques to come here. Damn the girl, she'd upset the whole government at a critical moment, maybe because it seemed to the kid like a good move. Or maybe because she wasn't a little girl any longer. She might be doing everything precisely to get a jump ahead of the opposition because she had reason to think there was diminishing time to do it. What had she said? That the explosion might have been a signal to those who knew that it was time to move? Other things were moving, all right. And maybe he and Frank had just become two more pieces on the board, White Bishop and White Knight, say, out there to tempt the opponent into doing something. She'd tried to tell him to get their asses home. She'd tried to tell him, get their asses home. He'd ignored her warning, confident in the moment he'd done it. Maybe he should get himself and Frank to the airport, and go home, this evening, while they could, settle in and let the youngster run the place. Or maybe the old bishop had a few moves in him. He and Frank had been at this thing a long, long time, and he wasn't out of resources yet. Khalid? He wouldn't concede the board to that bastard, not while he had room to maneuver. If we don't get Jacques out of there, Frank said, his lifespan is limited.
Jacques is due at science in 2 hours, and I think we should go there now, just in case anybody's timing our departure. If we are in the target, let's not make it too easy for them.
And that is where we will call it for today. I am not quite sure when the next stream will be, but it should be sometime next week. That, anyway, is the plan. So things have consistently gotten ratcheted up and more dramatic. Pretty aggressively. I forgot how much this started to fly towards the end. But it do fly, it true. Anyway, thanks to everyone who tuned in today. Appreciate you all. Hopefully, everything's going well for folk. That's important to me. Despite this crazy, unsettled world that we live in. Do your best to stay safe, stay sane, and be decent to each other, and I'll see you all next time. Toodaloo!